It started like any other minor civil hearing in Concord, New Hampshire. The courtroom buzzed with the usual low murmurs, until a sharp rap of the gavel cut through the noise. Judge Miles Wexler, known for his strict adherence to courtroom decorum, adjusted his glasses and cleared his throat. "Ms. Leavitt," he said, peering over his bench at the young woman standing confidently in the defendant's box, "I must remind you that religious symbols are not permitted in this courtroom. Remove the cross necklace or face a contempt fine." Gasps echoed across the room. Karoline Leavitt, former political firebrand turned legal activist, didn't flinch. The small silver cross rested just below her collarbone, subtle but deliberate. "With all due respect, Your Honor," she said, her voice steady, "you're violating my First Amendment rights." Wexler raised an eyebrow. "This is my courtroom. You'll follow my rules." Karoline didn't move. Instead, she pulled a slim, leather-bound copy of the Constitution from her bag and flipped it open with precision. "May I cite precedent, Your Honor?" Wexler frowned. "You're not an attorney. You may not argue here." She smiled. "Actually," she said, "I graduated top of my class from Georgetown Law. I passed the bar last month." Whispers erupted around the courtroom. Wexler blinked, caught off guard. "But rules were rules. Then you'll know a contempt fine is within my discretion. $50. Payable immediately." Karoline stepped forward slowly, then placed a crisp $50 bill on the clerk's desk. "Consider it paid," and challenged. The judge narrowed his eyes. "This court is adjourned for recess. Ms. Leavitt, stay where you are." As the room cleared, Judge Wexler stared at her, curious now. Who was this woman, and how had he underestimated her so badly? The courtroom had emptied, save for the soft clinking of Karoline's heels as she walked to the defense table. Judge Wexler remained seated, watching her with a mix of irritation and intrigue. He was known for breaking lawyers like dry twigs. But she wasn't breaking. She wasn't even bending. "You really passed the bar?" he asked finally, folding his hands in front of him. Karoline nodded, setting her Constitution down on the table like it was a weapon. "Passed it on my first try. Scored in the top 2% nationally." "You could have made partner in any firm," Wexler said. "Why stand here over a misdemeanor fine for wearing a necklace?" Karoline smiled thinly. "Because it's not about the necklace. It's about precedent. And you just walked into a constitutional minefield." Wexler raised an eyebrow. "You plan to sue the court?" "Oh no," she said, sitting down. "I plan to make an example of you. This court fined me for religious expression in a public space, a violation of Tinker v. Des Moines, County of Allegheny v. ACLU, and a dozen others. You didn't just fine me, Judge. You violated the Constitution. And it's all on record." The judge's face darkened. "Are you threatening a sitting judge?" Karoline's smile didn't waver. "I'm warning a public official who just breached the Establishment Clause on the record. That's not a threat. That's a legal courtesy." Wexler stared at her, then leaned back in his chair. "You came here looking for a fight." "No," she said. "I came here looking for justice. But I brought ammunition just in case." A clerk appeared at the door. "Your Honor, attorneys from the Press Freedom Coalition just arrived. They're requesting transcripts of the hearing." Wexler's jaw clenched. He hadn't realized how many eyes were on this. Karoline stood and smoothed her blazer. "This won't stay in Concord," she said quietly. "You've lit a fire, Judge. And I know how to make it burn." By the time Karoline walked out of the courthouse, the crowd had doubled. Reporters stood behind barricades, cameras rolling. Her silver cross gleamed in the winter sun as she stepped up to the podium someone had hastily set up. She didn't need notes. "In the United States of America," she began, "no judge has the right to fine a citizen for quietly expressing their faith, not in public, and especially not in a courtroom. The flashbulbs popped. She held up a printed transcript of the hearing. This document shows a violation not just of my rights, but of yours. If it happened to me, it can happen to anyone. By nightfall, #Crossgate was trending nationwide. A clip of the judge threatening her played on every major network. And then came the kicker. A leaked memo from the courthouse revealed Judge Wexler had previously warned others about religious displays, including a Sikh lawyer's turban and a Muslim woman's headscarf. It wasn't just about Karoline. It was systemic. Senators weighed in. One called it an alarming pattern of constitutional overreach. Another demanded Wexler's resignation. But Karoline didn't stop there. 3 days later, she stood before a congressional subcommittee on civil liberties. She had filed a federal complaint, and now, the entire country was watching. My case isn't unique, she told the panel. It's just visible. Judges are not above the Constitution. The courtroom isn't a sanctuary from scrutiny. It's where liberty is either upheld, or quietly dismantled. The room went silent. Representative Angela Croft, a seasoned Democrat from Oregon, leaned in. Ms. Leavitt, are you suggesting we open a formal investigation into judicial bias at the state level? Karoline didn't blink. I'm not suggesting, she said. I'm demanding it. The cameras were rolling. The political temperature was rising. And in that moment, Karoline Leavitt, once dismissed as just another loud activist, had become something much more dangerous, a legal genius with a platform, and nothing to lose. The pressure cooker was hissing in D.C. Within a week of Karoline's testimony, Judge Wexler had been placed under formal review by the state's Judicial Oversight Board. But while the public was rallying behind Karoline, a darker force was gathering in the wings, powerful figures who didn't like what she represented. Behind closed doors in a polished Georgetown townhouse, Senator Paul Dresden, a political kingmaker known for backroom deals and backstabbed allies, poured bourbon into a crystal glass and scowled at the TV replaying Karoline's fiery testimony. She's too smart, he muttered to his aide. And too damn loud. His aide, a former DOJ strategist named Lily Crane, didn't argue. She's not just smart, Lily said. She's surgical. If she keeps digging into judicial bias, she'll find the Dorsey Memorandum. Dresden turned slowly. You told me that was buried. It was, she said. Until now. The Dorsey Memorandum. An internal document from the Bush-era Justice Department outlining unofficial criteria for federal bench appointments, including religious and political bias filters. Officially denied. Deeply illegal. And if Karoline found it? Careers would explode. Dresden swirled his drink. Then we bury her first. Across town, Karoline sat at her kitchen table in a modest apartment lined with law books and open case files. She'd been up for 36 hours, researching Wexler's rulings, building patterns, and finding names. There was something deeper here, and she could feel it. A chain of judges, all making quiet rulings against religious expression, all with links to a shadowy judicial vetting group called the Dorsey Network. She wrote the name down. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Hello. A male voice. Calm. Cold. Unmistakably deliberate. You're talented, Ms. Leavitt. But you're playing in waters deeper than you know. Karoline's jaw tightened. Is that a threat? It's advice, the voice replied. Walk away. Before this becomes more than legal. Click. She stared at the phone, heart pounding, not from fear, but clarity. They were watching her. Which meant she was onto something. She wasn't walking away. She was going all in. The next morning, Karoline was already in motion. She didn't trust encrypted email. Didn't trust cloud storage. Instead, she packed her findings into a slim flash drive, red-cased, unmarked, and slid it into a hollowed-out copy of the Federalist Papers. Classic move. Old school, untraceable. Then she made the call. Ben. It's me. I need to meet. Tonight. Ben Ashford, former investigative journalist turned digital ghost. He owed her from a campaign scandal she'd exposed 2 years ago. Now, she was cashing in. They met at a train station cafe outside D.C., far from eyes and cameras. He wore a hoodie. She wore a blazer and dark glasses. Opposites, but in sync. "What is this?" he asked, holding the flash drive like it was radioactive. "Proof of coordinated bias in judicial appointments," Karoline whispered. "A network of federal judges handpicked not for their qualifications, but for their willingness to quietly gut the Constitution." Ben leaned back. "You're talking about the Dorsey Network." She nodded. He whistled low. "I heard rumors. But this is war." Karoline's voice was like steel. "Then sharpen your pen." 2 days later, the headline exploded across the country. Secret memo reveals political filtering of federal judges, whistleblower calls for inquiry, cable news lost its mind. Law schools scrambled to download the files. Civil rights organizations issued joint statements. And inside the Senate, a quiet panic set in. Karoline was summoned back to Congress. But this time, she wasn't alone. A coalition of constitutional lawyers, professors, and whistleblowers formed around her, calling themselves the First Clause Coalition. What began as a courtroom protest had become a full-blown movement. And then it happened. A second leak. Anonymous. Untraceable. But clearly from someone close to the top. It exposed emails between Senator Paul Dresden and members of the Dorsey Network, coordinating, vetting preferences, including religion, political loyalty, and even social media silence on progressive issues. Karoline stared at the files in disbelief. She had them. Cold. Hard. Evidence. But she also knew what was coming next. If they couldn't discredit her, they'd come after her life. The threats came faster now. Anonymous voicemails. Slashed tires. A strange man spotted watching her building at 3 a.m. Karoline had already changed apartments twice in a week, staying ahead of the dark tide closing in behind her. She didn't flinch. She kept moving. But her eyes never stopped scanning the corners. Across town, Senator Dresden was cracking. Inside a private room at the Capitol Hill Club, he paced like a caged animal. His phone buzzed again. Another journalist requesting comment. Another subpoena request. Another leak. "They're circling," Lily Crane warned. "We're bleeding, Paul. She's not just smart, she's airtight. Every document she drops is cross-referenced. Nothing we can spin." Dresden turned, eyes wild. "Then make something up. Dig into her past. I don't care if she stole a candy bar in 4th grade, ruin her." Lily hesitated. "There's one thing, off the record." He stopped. "What?" She pulled out a manila folder. Inside, sealed juvenile records, dated over a decade ago. Karoline's name on every page. She was arrested once. Sealed case. 17 years old. Charges dropped, but, the file says, unauthorized access to federal systems. Dresden's eyes lit up. She hacked the government. Lily nodded slowly. Technically. A high school prank, she broke into a secure district server during a mock trial project. They buried it because she was brilliant. But if this gets out, it paints her as a lawbreaker. Reckless. Dresden smiled for the first time in days. Release it anonymously. Let the public think she's not a genius, just a tech-savvy radical. Meanwhile, Karoline was in a safe house in Virginia, reviewing her next move with the coalition. Her phone buzzed, this time, a message from Ben Ashford. "You're trending again. They leaked your sealed file." She stared at the screen. Her hands didn't shake. Her face didn't change. "Let them," she said aloud. "If they want to open my past, fine. They just handed me the final chess piece." Her team looked confused. She walked over to a whiteboard covered in names and dates. Drew a line between her arrest and a name that had appeared on one of the internal Dorsey memos. "Guess who was working in cybersecurity at the time my record was sealed," she said. Pause. Then she circled the name, Lily Crane. The room went still. "This isn't a smear campaign," Karoline said. "This is a cover-up." And now she had a new mission, not just to prove the corruption, but to expose everyone involved in hiding it. Karoline didn't sleep that night. The moment she linked Lily Crane to her sealed juvenile record, everything clicked. The way the smear campaign had launched with surgical precision, the timing of the leaks, the exact framing, it wasn't just a hit job. It was personal. Someone who knew her past. Someone who had buried it, and just as easily dug it back up. She leaned over her laptop and began compiling everything she had on Crane, her former DOJ clearance levels, a cybersecurity paper she co-authored in 2011, and her sudden pivot into political consulting just a year later. Quiet. Efficient. Deadly. At 7:04 a.m., Karoline sent a secure message to a contact in the Inspector General's office, urgent, conflict of interest and tampering with sealed federal records attached, timeline, ID logs, and correspondence links. Confirmed match. Requesting formal inquiry into Lily Crane and her role in illegal dissemination of sealed juvenile files. Then she posted a cryptic tweet, "Funny thing about sealed records, only a few people ever had access. And I just found one of them." #accountability is coming by noon, political Twitter was ablaze. By 3 p.m., a watchdog organization filed a motion demanding a federal probe into Lily Crane's digital activity during her DOJ tenure. And by 6:17 p.m., Lily was nowhere to be found. Gone. Ben asked over the phone. "Vanished," Karoline said. "No signal, no sightings. Dresden's office says she's on medical leave." "You think she ran?" Karoline didn't answer right away. She was staring at a new email that had just hit her inbox, from an anonymous burner address. "You've got their attention now. But the deeper you go, the more dangerous it gets. There are names you haven't seen yet. Some wear robes. Some carry gavels. And some sit behind the president." Attached was a single document, a scanned memo dated 2 years earlier, marked confidential, executive channels only. In the top right corner, the seal of the White House. Karoline's breath caught in her throat. This wasn't just about judicial bias anymore. This wasn't just about Dresden or Crane or even Judge Wexler. This reached the executive branch. And if that memo was real, they had crossed the line from corruption into conspiracy. Karoline stared at the memo. It was short, barely half a page, but the implications were seismic. The document laid out a plan referred to only as Judicial Realignment Strategy, Phase 3. It contained language about ensuring ideological consistency, streamlining confirmation back channels, and, most damningly, pre-appointment screening for religious predispositions. It was unsigned, but the digital fingerprint embedded in the metadata told a different story. The document had originated from a secure terminal inside the White House counsel's office. Ben was already en route to the safe house when Karoline forwarded the memo to 3 legal allies and encrypted it 6 ways to Sunday. If anything happened to her, it would go public within minutes. "This is no longer about one courtroom," Karoline said when Ben arrived. "This is a blueprint for engineering a judiciary that silently serves executive ideology." He shook his head in disbelief. "And they buried it under the guise of national security clearance?" They buried it under silence, Karoline replied. And now we're digging it up. She convened a midnight war room with her first-class coalition. Constitutional scholars. Legal historians. Whistleblower lawyers. Even a former federal judge joined over Zoom, voice disguised, face obscured. We have a narrow window, said one of the advisors. Once we go public with a White House-linked document, they'll launch a full containment operation. Karoline was ready. Then we don't go public. They all looked at her. We go strategic. She laid out the plan. They would issue a congressional briefing packet, complete with the leaked memo and a list of judges confirmed under suspicious vetting criteria. But not to the media, to one senator. A quiet, ethical hawk with a reputation for independence and a loathing of executive overreach, Senator Elias Monroe. Independent. Vermont. Former constitutional law professor. No party strings. No fear. At 9:42 a.m. the next morning, the packet landed on his desk. By noon, he was on the Senate floor. And at 12:37 p.m., Senator Monroe dropped a political grenade. I rise today not as a politician, but as a citizen. I have in my hands a document that suggests a coordinated effort by executive officials to shape the American judiciary in secret, not through transparency, but through religious discrimination and ideological purging. I intend to call for a full judiciary oversight hearing. The chamber erupted. Back in her safe house, Karoline watched the speech live. Her hands were folded. Her cross gleamed in the light. They had tried to silence her. Now, she had the floor of the United States Senate. And she was just getting started. The hearing was scheduled within a week. Washington buzzed like a live wire. The words, judicial realignment strategy, had become a political firestorm. Cable pundits speculated around the clock. Protesters lined the Capitol steps, some carrying crosses, others waving pocket constitutions. Inside the marble halls, the Senate Judiciary Oversight Committee chamber was packed. Every seat filled. Cameras stationed at every angle. Live broadcast across the nation. Karoline Leavitt, dressed in a dark blue blazer and that same silver cross, stepped forward as the lead witness. Her expression, calm, precise. No anger. No panic. Just purpose. Senator Monroe, chairing the special session, leaned forward. Ms. Leavitt. You may proceed. She clicked her remote. A large screen lit up behind her. The leaked memo. The timeline. The appointments. The metadata trail. Each slide more damning than the last. Today, she said, I present evidence that the United States judicial system has, for the past 6 years, been slowly and methodically compromised, not by outside forces, but from within. The Dorsey Network. The screening systems. The illegal vetting of nominees based on religion, political silence, and compliance. She paused. This was not oversight. It was orchestration. Gasps. Shuffling. A ripple of discomfort among several senators. She turned to face the panel directly. Some of you knew. Some of you voted based on this filtering, whether you realized it or not. But now you do. And the Constitution doesn't allow ignorance as a defense. Senator Dresden, red-faced and seething, sat in the back row. He hadn't said a word. His aide, Lily Crane, still hadn't resurfaced. Karoline continued. I am not here today for revenge. I'm here for realignment, not political, but constitutional. We've drifted. And if we don't correct course now, we lose something we may never get back. Silence. Then Monroe spoke. Ms. Leavitt, do you have recommendations for action? She nodded. I do. A special prosecutor to investigate illegal judicial vetting. Federal protections for religious expression inside courtrooms. Full release of non-classified judicial screening documents. A nationwide audit of past appointments influenced by the Dorsey network. The list hit like a hammer. 3 days later, the Senate voted 68 to 32 to approve the investigation. Dresden resigned the following week. His final statement was vague, legalistic, and devoid of apology. Karoline didn't gloat. She just went quiet again, for a while. Months passed. The hearings continued. The story evolved into something bigger, a national conversation about what justice really meant, who it served, and who it silenced. Karoline returned home to Concord. No press. No podiums. Just peace. She still wore her cross. And in her living room, framed on the wall, was the $50 contempt fine she'd once paid, now signed by Judge Miles Wexler, who had since reversed course and publicly endorsed judicial transparency reforms. Under the frame, etched in small brass, one voice in a quiet courtroom can echo through a nation. The battle was over. But Karoline Leavitt had made history.